Hare Krishna. So this is the fourth part of our Nectar of Devotion portion of the ISKCON DC Bhakti Shastri course. And we're going to be covering today's chapter 7, 8, and part of chapter 9. And it looks like it was, so I was preparing, it looks like it was going to be too much for the time allotted to finish chapter 9. So we'll pick up where we leave off next week on that. And last week we finished with chapter 6, which gave the 64 angas, or 64 different principles for performing sadhana bhakti. And in this chapter, Rupa Goswami is going to provide scriptural evidence or scriptural support for those, and sometimes scriptural explanation. It'll give an understanding of why these things are so important. But he's showing that he's basing this on the revealed scriptures. And the chapter 7 covers the first 18 of them. And if you remember from last time, the first 20 were considered to be very important. 1 through 10 were preliminary items, Prabhupada said. And in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu itself, the verse said it's like the doorway to bhakti. And of those, the first 3, having shelter of a guru, being initiated by him and learning about bhakti, and then serving the guru, were considered to be the most important of those. And then the 11 through 20, there were things to be avoided, things that could be obstacles on your path. So the first ones were the things you do, for 1 through 10, and 11 through 20 were really the things you should avoid, things that could inhibit the progress of your sadhana. And so of those 20, we're going to cover the first 18 here in chapter 7. In chapter 8 is going to be entirely devoted to the 19th one, which I guess gives you also some indication of its significance, of all the different obstacles, the offenses, seva aparad, in service of the deity, and offenses against the name are very important. They can really inhibit the progress of your devotional service. So we'll go through the each one has this little separate section, and with the scriptural support, that's how the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is set up. He starts with one section and quotes different scriptures in support of that. So the first principle is accepting the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. You can't start something, a devotional service or something that's you start anything unless you have some proper guidance. And so it's so first of all, you have to find somebody who can teach you how to do it. And then Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he quotes Srimad Bhagavatam 11:321, and that's what Prabhupada lists in the Nectar of Devotion. But he also is quoting 11:320 because it provides context for that verse. So Prabhupada, he doesn't say it, but he actually translates both of those verses, 20 and 21. 21 is the one that has the most bearing on this particular item, but 20 gives a context to it, so it makes it more understandable. So Prabhupada actually included both of them in his translation. So I've quoted this here just from the Veda base. 11:320 is, one cannot find permanent happiness even on the heavenly planets, which one can attain in the next life by ritualistic ceremonies and sacrifices. Even in material heaven, the living entity is disturbed by rivalry with his equals and envy of those superior to him. And since one's residence in heaven is finished with the exhaustion of pious fruitive activities, the denizens of heaven are afflicted by fear, anticipating the destruction of their heavenly life. Thus they resemble kings who, though enviously admired by ordinary citizens, are constantly harassed by enemy kings, and who therefore never attain actual happiness. And then 21, it says, therefore, so therefore means it's connected to the last one, any person who seriously desires real happiness, understanding that there isn't any happiness in the material world, must seek a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. So this is the proof of the principle here. The qualification of the bona fide guru is that he is, and in the PowerPoint here, I've put in bold these things. Realize the conclusions of scriptures by deliberation, and is able to convince others of these conclusions, second qualification. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the Supreme Godhead and leaving aside all material considerations, as the other qualification, should be understood to be bona fide spiritual masters. So somebody, the process of devotional service is, as Rupa Goswami is showing here by how he's proceeding, is that the principles are given in the scriptures, and so somebody has to understand them very, very well. It's a revealed science. The goal is revealed, the means are revealed, and so somebody who's going to teach it has to understand. It says realize the conclusions of scriptures by deliberation means they can know how to apply them. They know what to do with them. You can't simply just have a list of the principles, but you have to know how to use them, how to apply them. Srila Prabhupada, he was transplanting Krishna Bhakti into a whole new cultural environment, and so he made different adaptations. He emphasized certain things he thought were most appropriate. He actually focused on the very essence of it. So he had to understand how to apply it, and able to convince others of these conclusions. So the presentation has to be convincing. And then leaving aside all material considerations, so the person has to be devoted. We're trying to, the bhakti means becoming devoted to Krishna. And so obviously if you're going to teach it, you have to know what it is, you have to be able to explain it properly, and of course you have to be devoted. You have to be doing it. So those things make I think, a lot of common sense there. And so the point of having the previous verse is that generally before you're ready to look for an alternative, you have to be burned out with the notion of material happiness. We're usually born very optimistic about our chances of being happy here in this world, and generally, as long as we have prospects of that, and we think we can have a new plan, there's something we can do about that we won't be interested in much else. So generally, it takes somebody who's convinced that that's not a viable path, that will want to take up a different one and take shelter of a spiritual master. In the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada, it's a summary study, Prabhupada calls it. And so he's able also, when he desires, to add a little bit of commentary. He can pay more attention to some things and less to others, and he can also add his own commentary. So he mentioned something we should be pretty familiar with from the very beginning of this course. He says that the spiritual master should have the following qualities: good character, follows devotional principles, and controls the 6 urges. That was from the Nectar of Instruction in the first text, and we'll quote that here. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So that's what we started with, actually. We began this whole course with that particular verse. And it mentions, it says that that's a qualification for making disciples, so Prabhupada includes that here. Then the second one is, of course, you find someone that you can learn from, and then you make a serious commitment. That would be a next step after that. First of all, you have to find someone who can guide you, and then you have to decide you're going to be committed to that. You want to take up the path seriously. And so that's when you accept initiation from the spiritual master and you receive instructions from him. You decide to take the guidance in a very serious way. And so Srila Prabhupada says that one should learn Srimad Bhagavatam from the spiritual master who is the representative of both Krishna and the super soul. And the reference here is from Srimad Bhagavatam 11.3.22. That's what Rupa Goswami quotes. And so I've got the the verse here on the next slide, you'll see the BBT translation. We can also understand where Prabhupada is coming from here. This translation kind of follows also what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments. And so you'll see it says here, the BBT translation says, accepting the bona fide spiritual master as one's life and soul and worshipable deity, the disciple should learn from him the process of pure devotional service. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, the soul of all souls, is inclined to give himself to his pure devotees. Therefore, the disciple should learn from the spiritual master to serve the Lord without duplicity and in such a faithful and favorable way that the Supreme Lord, being satisfied, will offer himself to the faithful disciple. Prabhupada gives his translation emphasizes a little bit differently. Here it says in the BBT translation it says Guru Atma Daivata, for he for whom the spiritual master is his very life and worshipable deity. Prabhupada translates Atma as the super soul and Daivata as the Supreme Lord Krishna. So he makes it a little bit more intense actually. And Bhagavatan Dharmam, the science of devotional service, Prabhupada sometimes calls it Bhagavat Dharma. But he says that he instead of mentioning this Bhagavat Dharma, he says he should hear from Srimad Bhagavatam. It seems like the Bhagavatam reminds him of that. And so Prabhupada says Atma refers to super soul. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it says that the Guru is the external manifestation of the super soul. So Prabhupada is taking, it's even more than, in the BBT translation, and this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur concurs with that, seems to be based on that. He says the Atma means like the Guru is as dear to you as your own self, and he's your worshipable deity. And here, Srila Prabhupada said you can take that to mean that also he's the super soul. And this is, I said, confirmed in Chaitanya Charitamrita that he's like the representative of the super soul, the spiritual master, the external form of that. And that he's Krishna himself. And in the next verse, that will be confirmed also. So who is your supreme worshipable deity? Krishna. So you should see, because he's the servant of Krishna. And he's doing the work of the super soul to teach you about Krishna consciousness. He's seen to be like that. And then he's giving us, I guess it's in one sense more precise, or he's stating how the Srimad Bhagavatam will be a key part in having us understand devotional service. So he says you should learn the Srimad Bhagavatam from him. You'll learn all about devotional service, but Prabhupada here emphasizes that, the Srimad Bhagavatam in the Nectar devotion. And then, once you've made a formal commitment and are learning the process, it says that you also have to serve the spiritual master with faith and confidence. And here Prabhupada writes in the Nectar of Devotion, he says, 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 17th chapter, verse 27, it is stated by Lord Krishna, "My dear Uddhava, the spiritual master must be accepted not only as my representative, but as my very self." So it confirms how Prabhupada looked at the previous verse. He must never be considered on the same level with an ordinary human being. One should never be envious of the spiritual master as one may be envious of an ordinary person, an ordinary man. The spiritual master should always be seen as the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by serving the spiritual master, one is able to serve all the demigods. So one thing that can happen is once you become familiar with somebody, once you have experience of being with somebody, there's a possibility of becoming overly familiar and losing a certain amount of respect. So here it says that that once you've made a formal commitment, you have to maintain the proper attitude, otherwise you're going to be offensive. So you should remember who the spiritual master represents, who he is. Krishna considers him to be his own self, and never be envious or against the spiritual master, and not think of him as just a regular person. He's performing an extraordinary function for you. And Prabhupada says the attitude of the disciple should be to satisfy the bona fide spiritual master, and then it will be very easy for him to understand spiritual knowledge. So in order to maintain the proper connection with him, there has to be the proper attitude and respect given. And then so these first three of the all these 20 are supposed to be very important. Of those 20, these first three are the most important, because once you find the proper guide, make a firm commitment, and learn the process of bhakti, a person can teach you all these other things. That's how it gets started. And without that, then how are you going to start, even? So the spiritual master is supposed to teach you all about devotional service. So those three, the other ones can follow from the first three in so many ways. So the fourth principle was following in the footsteps of saintly persons. And the genuine saintly persons are those who follow the scriptural rules governing bhakti. There's an emphasis in this section of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu on the scriptures. Jiva Goswami even says that the sadhu vartma means following the scriptures. So the saintly persons, the ones that you should follow, are persons who follow the scriptures, follow what's given in the scriptures. And there's a verse that's quoted in that regard, that someone who doesn't follow the scriptures but seems to be practicing bhakti is just causing a disturbance in society. Prabhupada says, by following in their footsteps, one easily makes progress. Bhakti is something that's well understood. Precise applications, may look a little different in different times and places, but it's a process that's well understood. It's been going on forever, and many people have successfully practiced it. So it's understood how it works. So if you follow the people that it's worked for, and you follow the scriptures that show the way, obviously it should be much easier to succeed in that way. And here it says that Rupa Goswami talks about Lord Buddha, who's considered to be an incarnation of the Lord. But he has a special purpose, which was to stop the unnecessary killing of animals. And so he actually denied the Vedas. So he didn't teach the Vedas. There's the Das Avatar Stotra says he was Nindasi, he defied the Vedas. So even though he's an incarnation, his teachings are not to be followed. So the saintly persons that you follow are those who follow the scriptures, and only those. Inquiring about eternal religious principles. Prabhupada says in the Nectar of Devotion, in the Naradiya Purana it is said, if one is actually very serious about devotional service, then all of his purposes will be served without any delay. And so I was looking at that, and I was trying to figure out how that related to making inquiries, trying to ask questions about devotional service and understand. And in the original verse that's quoted, it's meant that they should be very serious about understanding devotional service. So here I put in red, in parentheses, if one is actually very serious about understanding devotional service, and all of his purpose will be served without delay. And that makes it quite clear. If somebody's trying to understand, naturally you're going to ask questions. You're going to want more information, you're going to want clarification, you're going to have confusions and doubts and things. So that should be happening. We should be trying to understand it. And if we have some questions, we have some concerns, we have some doubts, we have some need for clarification, that's naturally going to happen if you're really trying to understand it. So, question. That's a try to clear those things up. That's important. And then the sixth one is being prepared to give up everything material for Krishna's satisfaction. And Prabhupada says, in the Padma Purana it is stated, for one who has given up his material sense enjoyment and has accepted the principles of devotional service, the opulence of Vishnu Loka, the kingdom of God, is awaiting. So it's a good trade. It's a good trade. It's also a fact that material enjoyment and bhakti are inversely proportional to each other. They're diametrically opposing things. Service and enjoyment are different. And trying to be attached to material things or to be immersed in spiritual things are also opposed to one another. So that's why most of us wish that we could somehow balance the two out very nicely. But it's not a good plan. The idea is to become more and more immersed in the spiritual and become less and less attached to the spiritual, to the material. Then the seventh one is residing in a sacred place. And Rupa Goswami, there's a verse that glorifies Dwarka, but it says Dwarka Adhi. And Adi means like and so on or so forth. So it indicates other holy places. That's where Prabhupada just says residing in a sacred place. And Rupa Goswami cites verses glorifying Dwarka, Jagannath Puri, and the Ganges as sacred places, but it's not limited to those. But the power of these sacred places can help you. You're in fact affected by your environment. And so being in a sacred environment is very helpful. And then accepting only what is necessary. And here Prabhupada really gives an interesting explanation. This is when he's, Prabhupada is our founder Acharya. And so he, is really speaking to us. And sometimes he gives directions that are really, particularly appropriate to us in our circumstances. So he gives some really, really good advice here. Usually, accepting what is only what is necessary means kind of more. Oftentimes, people will consider that to be material things, accepting only what's necessary for the body. Or Jiva Goswami says accepting only what's necessary for your material, what's necessary for your devotional service. But here, Prabhupada takes a little bit different tact on it. And he says the purport is that one should not neglect following the principles of devotional service, nor should one accept the rulings of devotional service which are more than what he can easily perform. So this is a kind of niyamagraha here. In Nectar of Instruction, we heard about this niyamagraha, where if we don't follow the principles of devotional service, we can't make any progress. But if we follow them in a way either not, he said in the Nectar of Instruction that we don't try to make spiritual progress from them. We've been talking about that, how bhakti is something innate in us, and following the practice of sadhana bhakti is supposed to awaken that. They're not ends in themselves. So we have to do them, but we shouldn't take them as ends in themselves, but means to the end of awakening the actual bhakti within us. I did a search one time, but when we were actually way back when we were looking at the Nectar of Instruction for Niyamagraha and the Veda base, and there are places where Prabhupada mentioned things similar to this, where he said that he teaches that he can't have people follow all the detailed rules in the West that people do in India. It's a different culture, and you can't put all the cultural things in there. And so he focused on the ones that were most important. So here he's saying that you have to follow the rules, but he says if we encourage offenses, we shall not be able to make progress in devotional service. It is better if one fixes up a regulative principle according to his own ability and then follows that vow without fail. That will make him advanced in spiritual life. So he's not taking on too much that can't be maintained. So he in that particular section of Nectar of Devotion, he talks about how we're really all supposed to chant, 64 rounds a day. But he fixed up the limit, the minimum to 16 because that was more practical. So it's better, he says, to have a principle that you can follow. So I think that's also a good instruction for people who are taking up devotional service. And better than trying to do everything at once and then making offenses by breaking your vows. It's better to be steady at something that's manageable. And that's Prabhupada's advice here. So accepting only what's necessary, he says, accept what you can maintain in order to move forward. Think about that, and try to do something manageable. As the bhakti increases, of course, then we should be able to do more and more. So that he took a little bit different tack on this one, and that I take is to be very, particularly applicable to our situation here in the modern world. We don't have so many people, right, who are going to be renounced and only accept enough to keep your the body and soul together. That isn't applicable to that many people. But this type of advice is very applicable. That take up the principles of devotional service, but do it in a sustainable way, and then progress in an orderly fashion. And then the ninth principle, oops, went too far here, is observing fasting on Ekadashi. And the basic principle is not just to fast, but to increase one's faith and love for Govinda or Krishna. The real reason for observing fasting on Ekadashi is to minimize the demands of the body and to engage our time in the service of the Lord by chanting or performing similar service. The verse that was given in support of this was talking about how there was remembrance for Govinda and how that was effective. So he said minimizing the needs of the body in order to be able to focus on remembering the Lord. That's the ability to remember the Lord. That's the effective part, particularly of the fasting on Ekadashi. To focus more on that. And then there's offering respect to the banyan trees. That's 10. And there's actually, it doesn't just mean the banyan trees, but there's banyan trees and other not all of them are even terribly similar, but there's other things to offer respect to associated with Krishna. There's the banyan tree, and in the commentary on the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, they said that the Bhagavad Gita mentions of trees on the banyan tree. So that's the connection there. There's the Amalaki tree, and apparently that's also associated with Lord Vishnu. Tulsi Devi, I have highlighted the ones that are the most important for us, Tulsi Devi and the Vaishnavas, but also the Brahmanas are to be respected, and the cows. And offering respect to, especially that for us, Tulsi and the Vaishnavas is the most important, but these other ones are helpful to us in the devotional service. And the cows would become next, really, for us. That you should, I think Jiva Goswami quotes a verse that you should tickle them or scratch them lightly. I think Prabhupada says in the Nectar of Devotion, feed them grass, circumambulate them. And that's beneficial. The 11th principle is the giving up of the company of non-devotees. So we talked a lot about that when we did the Nectar of Instruction. And Lord Chaitanya was once asked by one of his householder devotees what the general behavior of a Vaishnava should be. In this connection, Lord Chaitanya replied that a Vaishnava should always give up the company of non-devotees. Then he explained that there are two kinds of non-devotees. One class is against the supremacy of Krishna, and the other class is too materialistic. In other words, those who are after material enjoyment and those who are against the supremacy of the Lord are called Avaishnava, and their company should be strictly avoided. We talked a lot about that when we discussed the nectar of instruction. It means in particular, the type of association that you do. Doesn't mean you have to. We're existing in the world. We can't unless we retire, to the forest. We can't avoid non-devotees. They're everywhere. But what it means is that we have close association, friendship, and the loving exchanges that were talked about in the Nectar of Instruction. With our close relationships are with devotees, and or that we're not in a position where we take guidance and advice, except for maybe practical things, from non-devotees. We become like those we associate with closely, and we can be inspired by persons who are more advanced in devotional service, with people on our own level. We can really support each other, and we should try to help those who are less experienced, and that becomes very stable for us. And our other relationships, should be less intimate. We have to understand that we have a different goal for our lives and a different understanding of what's valuable, different values. And you might find they may be otherwise nice enough people and everything, but you don't want to be influenced by their worldview. So the closest people closest to you should be devotees, especially if our faith is not as strong as it can be. We can lose faith by that. The power of positive association. Prabhupada mentioned in the Nectar of Instruction that in any sphere of life, says everybody makes associations and around something that's valuable to them, and that helps them to be enthusiastic, and they help each other in that way. So that's important that we do. So the association and support of other devotees is absolutely essential for our progress. And then there's not accepting unfit disciples. And here Prabhupada mentions, of course, we're in the age of Lord Chaitanya, and he gives a little bit of leeway on that. He says, another stricture is that a person may have many disciples, but he should not act in such a way that he will be obliged to any of them for some particular action or some favor. That seems to mean that a person wants to attract many disciples. He has a need for having that, and so maybe he's making them promises in order for them to be disciples. He's obliged to them. He's not promising them just to give them Krishna bhakti. Then Prabhupada says, therefore, sometimes even at risk, a sannyasi in the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu may accept even a person who is not thoroughly fit to become a disciple. Later on, by the mercy of such a bona fide spiritual master, the disciple is gradually elevated. He says, Lord Chaitanya's causeless mercy is such that he advised all bona fide spiritual masters to speak about Krishna consciousness everywhere. But he says, however, if one increases the number of disciples simply for some prestige or false honor, he will surely fall down in the matter of executing Krishna consciousness. So that's the main thing. This one and the next two are a lot of them are just about pride. And the Prabhupada called it profit, adoration, and distinction. And so if somebody is trying to collect the disciples for their own self-aggrandizement, this is going to be a problem for them. But he said that somebody who's following in the mood of Lord Chaitanya, they may accept less than ideal disciples, he says, not completely fit, with the notion to helping them progress on devotional service, taking a chance on them. He did that with Prabhupada did that with us, And And so his purpose is not for self-aggrandizement, but to help. So in that case, it's not an offense. It's not an obstacle. It's when it's connected with this notion of self-aggrandizement. You want to be a big guru. You want to have people flattering you and things. But for the service of the Lord, he says they may take risks, he says. May sometimes, even at risk, may accept even a person who is not thoroughly fit. That's for Krishna's pleasure, not his own. And that's not an issue. Then constructing many temples. And here, Prabhupada mentioned how the Goswamis did it, that they were never interested in constructing temples, but that sometimes if somebody with money offered them something, he would say, okay, you go ahead and build it. And he said that the acharya should not be directly involved in the building of the temples. And so of course we saw with Prabhupada that he built some pretty big temples, and he was also oftentimes very involved in it. He didn't have, here he was saying there's somebody rich, and of course it would be assumed that it's somebody in India, with the Goswamis, who would have, sometimes it was a Maharaj or something like this, an actual king, would have the ability to construct the temple. So they said, okay, go ahead, you take the money and construct a temple. And they wouldn't have anything to do with it. Well, here we had Prabhupada with just his disciples. He didn't have people who could perform constructions. He had some of his disciples had some architectural skills and stuff, but they had no experience of building anything in India or building temples or anything. So Prabhupada was quite involved in it that way. But then Prabhupada says, unfortunately it happens that someone who is not fit to become a spiritual master may approach wealthy persons to contribute for temple constructions. If such money is utilized by unqualified spiritual masters for living comfortably in costly temples without actually doing any preaching work, this is not acceptable. Again, the self-aggrandizement thing. Build yourself a big palace. And then he says, if one has money, and he says this came from his Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisanta Saraswati, if one has money, instead of constructing costly temples, one should spend his money for the publication of authorized books in different languages for propagating the Krishna consciousness movement. And you see, this is what Prabhupada did. The temple projects, temple building projects, especially in those early days when Prabhupada was around, was funded by the book sales. There was the surplus monies from book sales to the BBT that were used to fund a lot of the temple building. So it was surplus, so there was money to print more books, always was there, and then surplus was used in temple construction. So he took his spiritual master's advice first, and of course the temples he built were not for his own self-aggrandizement, but he thought they were going to be useful in spreading Krishna consciousness, and they were meant for preaching. So just looking at it superficially, you may think that Prabhupada violated that principle, building big temples and being personally involved, but he actually followed his spiritual master's advice, and he was involved in the construction out of necessity, and he built the big temples because he felt they were crucial to the preaching of Krishna consciousness. They weren't for his own self-aggrandizement at all. So he followed it very well, actually. And then reading many books is the next one. This is also can be a self-aggrandizement thing. Nor, Prabhupada says, should one be enthusiastic about reading various types of books, save and except the ones which lead to the advancement of devotional service. So that's the one type. And Prabhupada says if we just read the books he translated by that time, that would be sufficient. And similarly, a bona fide spiritual master has no business reading many books simply to show his proficiency or to get popularity by lecturing in different places. One should avoid all these. So this is even for devotional books, just to become the most, to show off how intelligent he is, or to be popular. And this is a personal interest, not a devotional one. So again, there's a notion of one can be very studious and read very much if one is really using that nicely in Krishna service, and there's no self-aggrandizing or selfish motive involved in that. So those things can have selfish motives. Profit adoration and distinction. We mentioned that in the Madhurya Kadambini, it's mentioned as puja and pratishta, position and respect, honor, or worship are characteristics of unsteady bhakti. So you can see why these are obstacles. And then here, this was also one that was number 15, straightforwardness in ordinary dealings, or Prabhupada said in the last chapter, not being neglectful in ordinary dealings. And it just wasn't clear to me what was being referred to here when you look at the text of the Nectar of Devotion. But I looked up in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Jiva Goswami says that one should not perform low actions, so it's like begging in response to want or loss. So it's connected with this equilibrium in loss and gain. If you're needing something and don't have it, or you've lost something and think you need it, it may one of the reactions you might have, right, is to do something illegal or something demeaning in order to get it. And so otherwise, it says you're supposed to just remember Krishna. And so it's related to that next one, 16, equilibrium and loss and gain. These two are connected. One should not be disturbed in material loss, but rather should concentrate his mind upon the lotus feet of the Lord. And there is the following statement in the Padma Purana: within the heart of a person who is overpowered by lamentation or anger, there is no possibility of Krishna's being manifested. So these things, real strong emotional responses to these things. So we could respond to loss or a need, by acting in ways that aren't appropriate. Or we can remember the feet of the Lord and try to remain steady. Or we can be overpowered by lamentation and anger, which says keeps Krishna at a distance. And then number 17, the demigods. According to Vaishnava philosophy, one should offer respect even to an ant. So then what is there to speak of such exalted persons as Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma? We have strong strictures, that we're worshiping Krishna, that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead and the supreme worshipable object. And he's the source of everything. And so no other personality, especially one that's not Vishnu Tattva, there's Krishna has the various personal forms and things, can be worshipable. He's distinguished from everybody else. Everybody else is a product is a creation of Krishna. Their power is derivative from Krishna. So we never worship anybody else unless there's some direct connection with Krishna. But that doesn't mean that we demean others. Prabhupada says here we respect even an ant because they're souls eternally dear to Krishna. The devatas are servants of Krishna. They perform services for him in managing the material world, and so we are obliged to respect them. We don't worship them as if they're God. That's a different thing. But we give them respect. Not giving pain to any living entity. This is the statement of Mahabharata. A person who does not disturb or cause painful action in the mind of any living entity. And here I've made this part bold because I think it kind of gets to the heart of everything. Who treats everyone just like a loving father does his children. Whose heart is so pure, certainly very soon becomes favored by the supreme personality of Godhead. This shows some spiritual understanding. When we are grow in our devotional service, we become, it takes us to the mode of goodness. It makes us, we can understand ourselves as spirit souls. We get this happiness of devotional service. The param drishta navarti, the higher taste comes in. And so then we're not needy people. And we can then have empathy for others and concern for others and appreciation for others. When we're afflicted by kama, strong desires, then we can't. We feel like we're in competition. We feel we have to compare ourselves with others, hopefully favorably. We can't. We don't have empathy. We see others as competitors and obstacles and such things. But when we become more spiritually developed, we have empathy for people. We can understand that inside they're all souls just like us and dear to Krishna. So those people will be favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then chapter 8, this is we got up to 18. So 19 merits its own chapter. Offenses to be avoided. The 19th item was offenses committed in the service of the deity, seva aparad, and offenses against the holy name. There's two kinds of offenses, nama aparad. And it's explained that seva aparad, the service to the offenses made in the service to the deity, can be counteracted by chanting the holy name. But that is true as long as one does not commit the seva aparad neglectfully, thinking that it can be counteracted. Then, when that happens, you are turning that seva aparad into nama aparad when you're chanting the holy name, committing sins or offenses on the strength of the chanting of the holy name. It turns into nama aparad. So if by some mistake, we make some mistakes, and we make some offenses in the deity's service to the deity. If they're innocent mistakes like that, if it's not that we just figure, I'm protected, I don't have to worry about it. If we have the proper attitude, then those offenses will be counteracted by chanting the holy name. Prabhupada explains it here. He says, in the Padma Purana, it is stated that even a person whose life is completely sinful will be completely protected by the Lord if he simply surrenders unto him. Okay, so by surrendering to Krishna, all kind of sinful things are gone. We know that from Bhagavad Gita, sarvadhamam parityaja, mamekam sharanam bhajadati. He removes all the sinful activities, delivers one from sins, whoever surrenders to him. It says, and even when a person becomes an offender under the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that means the deity himself, he can still be delivered simply by taking shelter of the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The holy name is even more merciful. So it says, by surrendering to Krishna, we're having a little thunderstorm here. And by surrendering to Krishna, all sinful reactions can be removed. Even if one offends Krishna, who's removed those things, one can chant the holy name, and those offenses can be removed as long as it wasn't done willfully or carelessly. But he says, if one becomes an offender to the holy names of the Lord, then he has no chance of being delivered. So, so there's the whole list. There was two big lists of offenses against the deities, and it's really worthwhile to review those things. Many of them, some of them won't be applicable, like riding into the temple room on a palanquin and things. Many of the major ones we're probably already aware of. But it's useful to look through them, because when we're around the deities a lot, we also can tend to take them a little bit for granted. I think one of the things we're going to find as we look at the effects of all of these devotional activities, we should gain some more respect for the actions that we're doing, and realize how powerful and wonderful they are, and how fortunate we are to have access to them. And sometimes if we're around the deities too much, we may begin to take them a little bit too much for granted. So reviewing all of those offenses, I think, are quite beneficial. We're not going to cover them. There's just too many of them. And the real essence here is that as long as we make a good faith effort not to make that seva aparad, the chanting of the holy name will take care of that. But the ones that are really intractable, the things that are really going to hurt us, are the offenses against the chanting. So we're going to take a look at those. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his Madhurya Kadambini, he makes that statement that if we're not making progress in devotional services, and of course that presumes that we're following the process, that we're actually performing devotional service properly, otherwise following the different rules and procedures. But he says, if you're not making progress, then it means that there's the presence of namaparad. So that's what really holds you back. That's the thing that's the biggest problem that we have. And so we're obviously you should read over the offenses to the deities and study that on your own. I think you can do that. It's just about showing proper respect in various ways. But the things I wanted to focus on would be the nama aparad, since that's what's really, as long as we're making a good faith effort, that's what really is what's holding us back. And where if we make some progress, we can make progress in our devotional service. So there's the 10 offenses against the chanting of the holy name. Those who've been, to many temple programs, it's oftentimes standard to recite these before chanting japa in the morning at temple morning programs. And so you would have most of you will have heard this, and many again and again and again. But we'll review them. And so we have usually what we recite is taken directly here from Nectar of Devotion. And I've given here sometimes the kind of more general. Prabhupada he gives kind of in some ways purportful translations to this, and so I want to kind of give you the idea of the kind of the general terminology that's used for these offenses. Because I guess one thing can happen, when Prabhupada gives kind of purportful translations, he gives it kind of additional explanation. He's making it relevant to us. It's probably going to be what's most relevant to our experience, but we think it's limited to that. Like here, the first one is to blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name of the Lord. What if we have some devotee who's not, maybe not such a big preacher? So can we offend that person? Oh, they're dedicating their lives, to propagating the holy name. Well, of course, if someone is affiliated with ISKCON, it's thought that all the different activities somehow relate to the preaching, to the preaching. Maybe if it's indirectly, but we may think like that. Oh, this person's not propagating the holy name. Can we criticize that person? So in Sanskrit it's called sadhu ninda, or criticizing devotees. It doesn't mention specifically the propagating the holy name of the Lord, but Prabhupada is showing that people who are in Lord Chaitanya's movement, that's what they're doing. That's why the holy name is not going to be pleased. He's giving an explanation of why the holy name is not going to be pleased by blasphemy. Also, I heard a morning walk conversation, listening to it, and by the voice, I'm certain it was His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj who asked the question. And he asked Prabhupada what was the difference between blasphemy, fault-finding, and calling a spade, and seeing things as they are. And Prabhupada, he answered that blasphemy is when we say something untruthful about somebody. And fault-finding was when there may be so many good qualities present, but we focus on the bad ones. And then I guess what was left over is, he didn't answer the third part, so I guess that whatever's left over is seeing things as they are. And then to consider the names of demigods, like Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. again, the relationship between the devatas and Krishna has to be understood, that they are created by Krishna, their power is derivative. They can't be equal to or they can't be independent because they're coming from Krishna. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master, and so that would be one of the ways that we show disrespect. The offense in general is just disrespecting the spiritual master. So we also heard about how we're supposed to have the proper respect. Here Prabhupada's emphasizing the following the instructions. So that's the biggest disrespect you can have, is you don't listen to their instructions. They're here to guide you and you're not listening, but it just means that all kinds of disrespect also be included under that heading. And then to blaspheme the Vedic literatures or literature in pursuance of the Vedic version, and being critical of those things, not having faith in them. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination, or I put here exaggeration, you could say as well. That we hear how the amazing effects that chanting can have, and we say, well, maybe that's a little bit of hyperbole there. Maybe it might not be quite that much. It's nice, but maybe it doesn't do quite so much. So imagination or exaggeration there. That's the fifth one. And 6 is to give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord. So you're trying some unauthorized meaning or explanation. It's given to us why it works, what it is, what the holy name is. It's Krishna himself, and why it works and how it works. It has full potencies, Krishna's full potencies. But if we make some other kind of explain it in some other way that's unauthorized, or give some other meaning to it that's unauthorized, then we're offending the holy name. To commit sinful activities on the strength of the holy name of the holy name of the Lord. He said the holy name can clear away all of our sinful activities. It can counteract also our seva aparads. But then, if we just simply use the holy name in our sinful service, I can continue to commit sinful activities. I can be neglectful in my seva, and the holy name will save us. We're using the holy name in our service. And we're using chanting as an excuse for doing something opposite than we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be trying to serve Krishna nicely, and we're supposed to be trying to give up sinful activities. So it's using the holy name in our service, and the service we're doing, the service we're having it do for us is to help us do the wrong things. So again, not respectful of the holy name at all. And then we have to instruct a faithless person. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna one of the auspicious ritualistic activities offered in the Vedas as fruit of activities, karma kanda. We think it's just a pious activity. It's going to give us good karma. The holy name is far above that. It can lead us to pure love of God. So you're minimizing it in a terrible way. To instruct the faithless person about the glories of the holy name. And actually, Prabhupada gave a nice long explanation of that. And I meant to put it down here, but I see I have. I'm going to try to see if I can find it real quickly here. Because he gave a really beautiful explanation of that. And I meant to include it in the PowerPoint. Here he says, anyone can take part in chanting the holy name of the Lord. But in the beginning, one should not be instructed about the transcendental potency of the Lord. Because those who are too sinful cannot appreciate the transcendental glories of the Lord, and therefore it is better not to instruct them in this matter. If you look in the Harinam Chintamani, it mentions that that people who are innocent, who don't have any knowledge of the holy name, they really can't offend the holy name. They can chant jokingly, they can chant, derisively, they can, they and it has an effect on them. It says even they can chant it accidentally. That so the Arabic word for something bad is haram. So, but if you haram haram, it's rama rama. So even not even intentionally, somehow the syllables come out. I don't know if you remember, the story. Prabhupada once asked one of his disciples to approach the head of the O'Hare Airport in Chicago to ask them to rename it to the O Hare Krishna Airport. I guess he was thinking in this way, that people would be benefited even if they didn't know what it was. So persons without knowledge, they have this protection from offenses. And it still gives them benefit. It can't give them pure love of God, but it gives them a lot of benefit. Once you know the power and potency of the holy name, then you have a responsibility to respect it. And you're opening yourself to offenses. So when we, as devotees, chant Hare Krishna, the opportunity of acquiring Krishna Prema opens to us that isn't available to those who are ignorant of the powers of the holy name. But a second door opens of the possibility of making offenses. So now that we know how valuable it is, now we have a responsibility to treat the holy name properly. So better to let people chant a little bit and be purified and say something general about it, rather than getting into the details of the theology. And because they might not have faith in that, and they might then, but by hearing about it, then they can make offenses. So better to let the holy name work on them a little bit first, give them some adhikar to understand, some basis for understanding. 10 is to not have complete faith in the chanting of the holy names, and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. In general, it says having no attraction for the holy name is kind of an alternative translation to that. So again, so when process, if you don't have enough faith in it, then you maintain all your material attachments, and so you don't have an attraction or a strong attachment for chanting in that case. And then we have the 11th offense. There's the 10 offenses, but then there's the 11th one that we always usually recite. It's not here. It's not present here in the Nectar of Devotion, but we always hear about it. And it's also, when we recite, it's also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. So this inattention or pramadaha, let's say is the in quotation mark, or in parentheses, the 11th offense, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is the root of all the other offenses. So if we're not attentive in our, it shows disrespect. It shows some disrespect. Here the holy name is, it's Krishna himself, and I can't even bother to pay attention to it. So it's as if somebody invites you over to their home and neglects you, you'll feel offended. So we're inviting Krishna by chanting, and then if we don't pay attention, we're just being neglectful. It says, in Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that provides the environment, the kind of the fertile soil for all of the other offenses to grow and develop. I see a connection between this inattention and this 10th offense where we don't have an attraction. We have these other, don't have faith and don't have so much attraction, and also with the Lord Chaitanya's Shikshastakam, right? In the second verse of the Shikshastakam talks about this. And I'm quoting here from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It says, where Lord Chaitanya was reciting the Shikshastakam for the first time. The lamentation and humility awoke within Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he began reciting another of his own verses. By hearing the meaning of that verse, one can forget all unhappiness and lamentation. My Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, in your holy name there is all good fortune for the living entity, and therefore you have many names such as Krishna and Govinda, by which you expand yourself. You have invested all your potencies in those names, and there are no hard and fast rules for remembering them. My dear Lord, although you bestow such mercy upon the fallen conditioned souls by liberally teaching your holy names, I am so unfortunate that I commit offenses while chanting the holy name, and therefore I do not achieve attachment for chanting. So here it's saying that the offenses prevent you from attaining attachment to chanting. And so this is Chaitanya Charitamrita Antya-lila 2015, 16, and I'm quoting 17, 18, and 19, where he kind of reflects upon it a little bit. He says, because people vary in their desires, you have distributed various holy names by your mercy. Regardless of time or place, one who chants the holy name, even while eating or sleeping, attains all perfection, and you have invested your full potencies in each individual holy name. But I am so unfortunate that I have no attachment for chanting your holy names. So I made a little diagram here on this next slide. How it says inattention, offenses, and lack of attachment feed off each other. So we saw that inattention leads to offenses. Offenses lead to a lack of attachment. And a lack of attachment, meaning that you have other priorities and such. That's of course going to increase your inattention. I think it makes sense. So that it can be it's a vicious cycle here, and of course it can go back the opposite way. If you can reduce your offenses, you can stop feeding your lack of attachment, which can increase your attention. If you increase your attention, you'll reduce your offenses. If you can develop some attachment, you can decrease your inattention and decrease your offenses. So any place on this little triangle here, if you make some improvement, you can begin to make improvement all the way around. And if you move in the wrong direction on any of the three, then also it'll affect the other two. So our inattention, kind of betrays that we don't have a real appreciation for the name. Right. And that leads to offenses, which then lead to a lack of attachment, which then can feed more the inattention, as far as I understand it. So these three things are. So if we can somehow be more aware of the value of the holy name, have greater appreciation for it, naturally we're going to pay more attention. If we naturally pay more attention, we're going to commit fewer offenses. That's going to keep us from dragging down our attachment. That's going to make our attachment be able to increase. So these things are really tied together. We saw in the 10th offense and the 11th offense, and the explanation for the lack of attachment that was given in the Shikshastakam, the offenses in general. So that concludes the 8th chapter. We're not getting nearly as far as I'd hoped to today. We'll be picking up. Look, I'm going to have some of my preparation done for next week already. But anyway, we'll get as far as we can here. Chapter 9 is further considerations of devotional principles. So chapter 8 was dedicated only to the 19th one, principles of devotional service, the 19th of the 64 principles that Rupa Goswami gave in chapter 6. And so now we're going to go through items 20 through 41. So we finish off the top 20, we consider to be very important, and then we move into the body of other ones. 20 is blaspheming the devotees of Krishna, and here Rupa Goswami quotes Srimad Bhagavatam 10:74-40. I've given the Veda-based translation of that. Anyone who fails to immediately leave the place where he hears criticism of the Supreme Lord, or his faithful devotee will certainly fall down, bereft of his pious credit. So it says one should immediately leave. But Prabhupada gives some elaboration on this. He said that, and he first of all he says that because we have the famous verse of the Shikshastakam that we should be, more tolerant than the tree and humbler than a blade of grass. And he says that doesn't apply in this case. That one should be humble and tolerant if blasphemy is directed at oneself, but not if directed at the Lord or other devotees. So the humility is for us. If somebody blasphemes us, even though we're devotees, we can be very humble and tolerant. But for others, we cannot do it. That becomes an offense. And Prabhupada says there are 3 ways of dealing with such insults. If someone is heard blaspheming by words, one should be so he gives the 3 things. One should be so expert that he can defeat the opposing party by argument. So, if possible, you should be able to engage with them, disprove them, or in some way deal with it directly, not just run away. But he says if he is unable to defeat the opposing party, then the next step is that he should not just stand there meekly, but should give up his life. And he says the third process is followed if he is unable to execute the above mentioned 2 processes. And this is that one must leave the place and go away. When the cases like this, Prabhupada says we should give up his life. Obviously, this is not something he was expecting us to do. He wanted us to one, and the third one, we wouldn't be expected to do that. I guess he doesn't give any more context. That, but I guess if somebody is very advanced, is a very advanced soul, and they may feel that they would want to give up even their life because they couldn't defend their beloved Lord. This is way above our station. But he mentions this for completeness. This is not one that we should be considering ourselves. If we can dispute what's being said, try to give good instruction, excellent. If not, we just go away. But it's interesting. Prabhupada mentions this other part, that someone could be so disturbed that they would want to give up their life even. And then wearing tilak and tulsi beads and other kinds of Vaishnava decorations. There's 3 verses that are quoted with respect to those who wear Vaishnava markings, tilak, tulsi beads. It said also markings of the items that Lord Vishnu holds in his hands, the writing of the holy name on the body. And it says that those persons purify the earth, they will be avoided by the Yamadutas, Yamaraj won't touch them, and they will go to Krishna Loka. So here we're going to get into these interesting things that maybe we even take them for granted. We do them all the time. And we hear all these wonderful benefits of them. And I think that takes a little explanation too. Because otherwise the other thing we might do is we really appreciate these things and think, well, we've already punched our ticket to Krishna Loka. I've already put tilak on. I've put neck beads on. I've, done all these various things. So I've already done it many, many times. So I've got my ticket already punched. Now I can go do what I like. Generally, when benefits like this are given, and sometimes we're going to hear somebody even goes into the temple for a little while. They're going to go back. They're not going to take birth again. We're going to hear these really extraordinary benefits. It doesn't mean that these benefits happen exactly that way all the time. We have the example of Ajamil, who called out the name of his son when he was dying, Narayan, and got credit for chanting the Lord's name. Of course, it's difficult to guarantee that it's going to happen, but sometimes these things happen, and the effects come, really extreme effects happen in certain cases. But it gives you an idea of how powerful these things can be. Or otherwise, you can look at it as that that now you're on the path. When you're on the path of devotional service, it's taking you to that destination. So it may not be that you go to Krishna Loka right now or this life necessarily, but it's a lock at some point in the future. Otherwise, we're going to look at this and go, oh, I've done this enough. I'm already done. And the idea here is to make us want to perform devotional service, not to think that we've already attained success. So when we hear how powerful these things can be, either immediately or in the future, it should give us great encouragement to increase our devotion more and more. That's the plan here. And so then it says accepting flower garlands is the next one. And there's the verse that's quoted from the 11th canto, chapter 6, text 46. It says, simply by decorating ourselves with the garlands, this is Uddhava speaking to Krishna, simply by decorating ourselves with the garlands, fragrant oils, clothes, and ornaments that you have already enjoyed, and by eating the remnants of your meals, we, your servants, will indeed conquer your illusory energy. So here, garlands and other types of prasadam. And then Prabhupada says, even if one does not accept all the Vaishnava principles, this is an interesting quote here, an encouraging one, but still takes the remnants of foodstuff offered to Krishna, or Krishna Prasada, he will gradually become qualified to rise to the platform of a Vaishnava, so the power of prasadam. And these other all types of prasadam are not to be minimized. So even somebody who's not a practicing Vaishnava, doesn't accept all the Vaishnava principles, but takes those things, is greatly benefited. They will gradually become qualified, Prabhupada says. The gateway. They call it gateway drugs, when people you start to take some kind of intoxication, leads to other ones. Well, this is transcendental gateway. Prasadam. And 23, dancing in front of the deity. And Prabhupada says, just as by clapping the hands one can cause many birds to fly away, similarly the birds of all sinful activities which are sitting on the body can be made to fly away simply by dancing and clapping before the deity of Krishna. And there was a previous verse that said if one was dancing, joyfully and with emotions, that so many sins, Prabhupada says committed even thousands of years, but it's in some ways even more intense than that. The word is from many hundreds of manvantaras. In the actual verse in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and a manvantara is like 71 yuga cycles. The yugas go through the 4 yugas. That when you pass through all 4 of them, that's one cycle. And so if you calculate that out, hundreds of those, it comes from thousands of yuga cycles. The manvantara is 71 yuga cycles. If you have hundreds of those, you're talking about thousands of yuga cycles. So it's a lot of sins. And then there's bowing down in honor of the deity. The person who has once offered respects, bowing down before the deity, will not come back to this world because he will go directly to the abode of Krishna. So that's another one of those where, we've probably bowed down a lot of times. He says once offered. So now, hey, we're free. No, the idea is to appreciate the opportunity to bow down. We should want to do it more and more and more, to not take that so much for granted. Look how powerful and wonderful that is. If you want to do it more. Standing up to receive the Lord. It says in the Brahmanda Purana, it is said, a person who sees the Lord's Ratha Yatra Kar festival. This is the one we're familiar with, but it also said sometimes the deities are moved by being carried on a palanquin. Any way that they're carried, says this applies to. And then stands up to receive the Lord, can purge all kinds of sinful results from his body. and following the deity procession. A similar statement is there in the Bhavishya Purana, in which it is said, even if born in a lowly family, a person who follows the Yatrakar, when the deities pass in front of him or from behind, will surely be elevated to the position of achieving equal opulence with Vishnu. So again, we have attended many Ratha Yatras. So we see how many wonderful blessings are coming from all of our different devotional processes. And so we should be encouraged, and feel fortunate that we can do these things. Then 27, going to the temple of Vishnu or to places of pilgrimage. And the one verse said that visiting the pilgrimage places makes one cross the desert of samsara or birth and death. No happiness here, so it's like it compared to a desert. And visiting temples makes one free from another birth. So we hearing similar things here: freedom from birth and death, freedom from all sins. And then circumambulating the temple of Vishnu, again says frees one from another birth. And then the one verse that was given that the Rupa Goswami gave was from a section that was glorifying the Chaturmasya Mahatmya. And that's why Prabhupada mentions in the Nectar of Devotion how if he explains a little bit what the Chaturmasya Vrata is, and that people do that. So he says that while observing that particular vrat or vow, if one circumambulates the temple at least four times, it's considered that they are that's equal to visiting all the holy places. He says, traveling over the universe, he said, and it's equal to visiting all holy places where the Ganges flows. So Jiva Goswami says it beats going to the holy tirthas, because you do all of them in that one little quick thing. It's superior to traveling to all the tirthas, because you get the same benefit. Then 29, Archana, worshipping the deity. Simply by worshipping Krishna, one can easily achieve all the results of heavenly opulence, liberation, supremacy over the planetary systems of the universe, all the opulences of this material world, and the mystic power of performing the yoga system. We already heard verses like that when Rupa Goswami was trying to help us to overcome desires for bhukti and mukti. That devotional service is superior to all of those, and so we should be working on eliminating those desires, understanding the wonderful superior benefits of devotional service. So worshiping Krishna, you contain all that and more. And any person within this world who is engaged in the worship of Vishnu can very easily achieve the ever blissful kingdom of God known as Vaikuntha Loka. So any of these other things, they're there, but you can also go, the devotional service gives you all that and more. It's that powerful. Worshipping Krishna by worshipping the deity. Then rendering service to the Lord, this also refers to the deity. A verse from the Naradiya Purana says that one who stays in the temple for a short time goes to the spiritual world. So how much more fortunate are those who serve the deity in the temple? In the Nectar Devotion, Prabhupada kind of separates those two, but the verse in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu makes that explicit comparison. Prabhupada kind of says both of them happens like that. That someone who worships the deity in the temple goes to the spiritual world, and somebody even who stays in the temple goes to the spiritual world. But the verse was constructed so there's like a comparison. So somebody even who comes in for a muhurta, a small amount of time, and stays in the temple, that person will go to the spiritual world. So imagine the benefit for somebody who's actually worshiping the deity in the temple. The verse was making that comparison. So imagine how fortunate that person is. And then there's the Srimad Bhagavatam 4:21-31. By the inclination to serve the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, suffering humanity can immediately cleanse the dirt which has accumulated in their minds during innumerable births. Like the Ganges water which emanates from the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord, such a process immediately cleanses the mind, and thus spiritual or Krishna consciousness gradually increases. So it should be encouraging us to serve more and better. And then singing is 31. In the Linga Purana, there is a statement about glorifying and singing about the Lord. It is said there, a Brahmana who is constantly engaged in the singing of the glories of the Lord is surely elevated to the same planet as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna appreciates this singing even more than the prayers offered to Lord Shiva. And Jiva Goswami, in his commentary, he says that generally the Brahmins aren't supposed to sing. I guess that's not a prohibition against devotional songs, apparently, but they're not supposed to sing songs. So he says it should really read, even a Brahmana who is constantly engaged in singing the glories of the Lord. Because here we might think we have to become a Brahmana in order to sing. He says actually generally singing is not allowed for the Brahmanas, but if they sing, if they even seemingly doing something wrong, sing the glories of the Lord, they will be delivered. So what to speak, I guess, of the rest of us who are allowed to sing. Then 32 is Sankirtan. What do we have left here? Okay, looks like we're going to we'll finish what I have here. We'll just have a little bit left in chapter 9. Sankirtan. When a person loudly chants the glories of the Lord's activities, qualities, form, etc., his chanting is called Sankirtan. Sankirtan also refers to the congregational chanting of the holy name of the Lord. Prabhupada defines it. A sinful man can perform many, many sinful activities, but he is unable to perform so many that they cannot be wiped out by a single uttering of Krishna. And then the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.22, learned circles have positively concluded that the infallible purpose of the advancement of knowledge, namely austerities, study of the Vedas, sacrifice, chanting of hymns, and charity, culminates in the transcendental descriptions of the Lord, who is defined in choice poetry. I gave the Prabhupada's translation from that Bhagavatam verse. In the Nectar of Devotion, he adds a little bit of explanation too. He says that these people are doing all these things, attaining knowledge and austerities and studying the Vedas and performing sacrifice and chanting hymns and charity, in order that they. How does it happen that it culminates in transcendental descriptions of the Lord? By finally gaining the association of devotees who can help them with that. And it's indicated here that chanting about, and Prabhupada says, it's indicated here that chanting about and glorifying the Lord is the ultimate activity of the living entity. Clarifies that. And then there's japa. This is the last one here. Chanting a mantra or hymn softly and slowly is called japa, and chanting the same mantra loudly is called kirtan. This is the Hare Krishna mantra, can be used for both. Chanting the same mantra loudly for being heard by all others is called kirtan. And it says, in the Padma Purana there is a statement, for any person who is chanting the holy name, either softly or loudly, the paths to liberation and even heavenly happiness are at once open. So, next time we'll take up with 34, finish up chapter 9, and then can carry on after that.